Everyone got so quiet. Well, thank you all very much for being here. Thank you for participating in the investment in yourself by participating in the February Education Program and our first PCMA Southeast meeting of the year. You are truly appreciated. Thank you. You made the time in a busy day and a week to support PCMA Southeast and to increase your knowledge about a very important topic today. Hopefully, you will also appreciate the opportunity of seeing Atlanta's newest event and sports venue. Your chapter board is dedicated to finding spaces that are outside of the norm, and I think we have achieved that today. Please show your appreciation to Michelle Lorber, Alex Bourbeau, and all of the PCMA board. We have an amazing program for you today from Alan Kleinfeld on safety and security, a highly sensitive issue for everyone in the business of meetings today. Also, hello to everyone. Nope. Sorry. Hello to everyone who is live streaming. We appreciate our partnership with Shepard AV, who provides this service for us. And did you know that if you cannot attend a PCMA Southeast event, that you can live stream from anywhere for $15? It's a great deal, and all participants will receive the appropriate educational credits for joining us. And by the way, if I didn't introduce myself, I'm sorry. I'm Chris Colbert. I am president of PCMA this year, PCMA Southeast. So thank you, everyone, for being here. I appreciate it. And now you can see, save the dates. We have planned some really great programs for you all in 2020. And all of these events are on our PCMA Southeast website. We look forward to our next event in Central Florida in March. And anyone can attend that event, by the way. And the success of these programs and our chapter would not be possible without the efforts of your board members. And I would like to take a moment right now just to thank the board members who are here for all that they have done in the past years as well as this year. Kevin Bellinger's not here. Obviously, I am. And then Bernie Wilkie is our president-elect. Bernie? So Bernie will be your president next year. Get to know him. As Molly Johnson is our treasurer, and Molly, raise your hand, please. Yeah, and Molly also is in North Carolina. So Molly's in Wilmington, and she is in North Carolina, and she serves on our board. So it just goes to show you, you do not have to be in the Atlanta area. PCMA Southeast is 7 states plus Puerto Rico. You do not have to be local to volunteer. So if you would like to volunteer, I was just speaking to Van Ingram earlier from Nashville Convention Center, and Van is going to hopefully be working with membership. So you do not have to live here to volunteer. And if you do live here, there is no reason why you shouldn't be volunteering. Thank you, Michelle Lorber, Director of Live Events. Michelle, thank you, back in the back. And Charlene Lopez, Director of Sponsorship. And so, Charlene, raise your hand, because if you all want to sponsor something, see Charlene. And she'll give you some great opportunities to do just that. Brad Smith is our Director of Community Service, and actually Brad is from Nashville, and Brad is flying in right now and should be here on the great plane train shortly. And then Mary Klein, Director of Membership. And Tanisha Landry is our new Director of Communications, and Tanisha is in New York right now with a show, a meeting that she's putting on. She's with Points of Light. Edward Vargo is our Director of Volunteers, and I don't think I don't see Edward. But if you are interested in volunteering, you can speak to me or any one of the board members I've just introduced, or you can speak to Edward. Alex Bourbeau, Director of Education, and Alex is here. There he is. And Lisa Gardner, some of you all have met, and Lisa is our chapter administrator. And she does a great job. So sponsors are another very significant component of any event. And again, if you're interested in being a sponsor, please see Charlene Lopez. But one of our sponsors today is the College Park Skyhawks basketball team. And right now, I'm going to turn the mic over to Janice Kuhn, the Vice President of the College Park Skyhawks basketball team.
Thank you, Chris, and welcome to what feels like our house. I'm here to talk a little bit about the team and the league. The College Park Skyhawks are the NBA affiliate of the Atlanta Hawks. This is our first year, and if you're wondering, yes, we're a really good team. We're number 2 right now in the Southeast, and after this, we're going to talk to Mercedes and Giannis about playoff dates in April. The G League is the NBA's developmental league. So, easiest said, it's the minors. It's growing exponentially. We're at 28 right now. In the next 18 months, we plan to be at 30. And in the last 6 months, we actually have a team in Mexico City starting up. Is there any real talent? Well, yes, there is. 16 players that were in the 2019 finals played in the G League, and 9 were on the Toronto Raptor team. But it's not only a place for players to develop. Currently, there's 4 NBA coaches that started off in the G, and then there's a whole business part of it. So when you want to start and further a career in sports, this is the best way to get some experience. We're locally owned, and it's very exciting. College Park owned. 2 Chainz, Grammy Award-winning hip-hop artist, philanthropist, College Park native, is a part of our ownership group, and he's involved. He's fantastic in the boardroom, sits right over here with all of his family, and equally entertaining on the baselines. In a nutshell, what you can see when you come here is amazing basketball. You're going to be fed well because you're in the South, and you're in Mercedes' house. Exceptional hospitality. And I want to give a shout out to Gateway Arena. In their very first year, because of how they set this up, it's actually the new gold standard for the G League for security. So this is one of the safest, most secure buildings. And for them to pull that off, it's sort of remarkable. Now I'd like to welcome Angela Spence, my partner in crime, who's going to talk a little bit about getting your groups here.
Thank you. Awesome. Good afternoon. All right. My name is Angela Spence. I am the Director of Sales for the Atlanta Hawks and College Park Skyhawks. There are a ton of really cool things to do in Atlanta, whether it is a first-time visitor or somebody who's coming out year after year. We are thrilled to have been able to launch this team and add the Skyhawks to the mix. So what Janice touched on previously in terms of why we think you guys will have some interest in making it out to games, I'm going to touch on some of the offers and opportunities that we can provide for individuals, visitors, and groups alike, and why some of the reasons they'll have some interest in making it out to games as well. So when thinking about the College Park Skyhawks, we have noticed that there's really 3 main reasons as to why people are making it out to our games and coming back. The first one would be they're a basketball fan. So they just want to see good basketball, and we put on a good show. The second reason would be they enjoy the family environment that we're able to provide. And the third reason is really business-centric. It is their businesses wanting to bring their clients out. They know that they can have an affordable option to have them come out, sit courtside, and take advantage of our exclusive VIP zone. For visitors coming out to Atlanta, whether they fall within one of those 3 different buckets, the College Park Skyhawks is the ultimate live entertainment option for individuals and for group outings. So why suggest for a group to come out to a game, or why even bring a group out to a College Park Skyhawks game? There's endless benefits. First being there's discounted tickets that are available. The group gets to sit together. We have block reserved seating. You get a personal representative. And not to mention, our group tickets start at just $9 per person. That's insane, I know. In addition to that, we have exclusive fan experiences. There's no additional cost for our groups to participate in these fan experiences. It's a ticket minimum. So whether it is the group standing on court, high-fiving the players as they come out for player warm-ups, or the group standing on the court in front of the future stars, future NBA stars, there is a perfect, unforgettable opportunity for every single group. So how do you guys get involved and learn more? You can absolutely check out our website at cpskyhawks.com. We encourage you to come out to a game. Up there we have vouchers to be able to redeem. You and a guest come out, experience it firsthand. We will also leave these little note cards at the top as well. There's a little bit of tidbit of information on the back, and then our information on the front. And then I will leave my business cards as well. I would love to speak with you guys individually and personally to, one, really understand your process and see how we can fit the Skyhawks into your process, your group outing. Thank you so much. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce Mercedes Miller, who is the Executive Director for the GICC and Gateway Arena.
Thank you, love. Okay, I know we can do better than this. We're in a sports arena, so I'm going to need some more energy. Welcome. Let's have some energy. Very good. Again, I am Mercedes Miller. I'm the Executive Director for the GICC as well as the Gateway Arena in College Park. And do we have a lot going on here? So happy about the Skyhawks. Those that know me, I've been in hospitality for over 32 years. And I am an avid sports fan. I like football, hockey, you name it, wrestling, I like it all. So what a blessing it is to have basketball right next door to the convention center and right here in the city of College Park. Not only did the Skyhawks come to College Park, they named their team after College Park, so there's no greater honor. We also have the Dream that's going to play in the spring, and we are very innovative in College Park. So what we did was we partnered with the Fox Theater downtown. So the Fox Theater, they like booking plays, but they also have the contacts for concerts, so they book our venues for concerts. So any of the concerts that's coming to the area, they go through the Fox Theater, and they work with our sales team here in order to book events here. Plus, we have private events here. So we have a lot going on. But I cannot do what I do without the great staff that works here at the arena. Giannis is somewhere. Denise books everything. Andrea makes sure everything happens. So there are a lot of people that make this happen. They make me look good. I need them. They don't need me. So I always like to give homage to them for all the hard work that they do. On the campus, we have a new AC hotel that's opening up. It'll open up this spring. I think it's 200 rooms. Then we have a Sheraton hotel that's going to start construction. We're also working on Airport City, which is 300 acres right across from the convention center. And then there's a proposed bridge that's going to go from this side of Camp Creek, cross over Camp Creek over to the other side. So there's a lot going on. So if you come next year, not if, but when you come next year, it'll look totally different again. So every time you come, it'll be something different. But thank you all for coming. Thank you for being a part of what's going on here. And welcome. Let my house be your house. Thank you. And before I sit down, Chris, you don't have to get up. I can introduce her. She really needs no introduction because she's known all over the United States. We kind of call each other salt and pepper, and I'm the salt, she's the pepper. Sometimes she's the pepper, I'm the salt. But I want to introduce you to our president for our CVB, Miss Cookie Smokes.
You stole all my thunder, Merc. Darn, I hate when that happens. You already told them about all the hotels. What was I going to say? Thank you all for coming, and thank you for giving us this opportunity, Chris. I appreciate the chance to be able to address you all and let you know how excited we are. Now you all know why I came down here. You see, we're getting hotels, we're getting Airport City, we've got a brand new Embassy Suites going in over on Central Avenue. I mean, there's just a lot of development going on, a lot of great things. We are now the third largest CVB in the state of Georgia, and we're probably one of the newest. We've only been around just going over 6.5 years. So I'm very excited. I'm like Mercedes. I couldn't do my job without the wonderful team that I have. They are all amazing, and they make me look good. And I will tell you that we currently have 61 hotels in the airport district. We are the CVB for the cities of College Park, East Point, Hapeville, and Union City. And who knows? You never know what we're going to add. It would just, the sky's the limit. But we have 61 hotels, over 8,000 hotel rooms. We sell the GICC. We sell this beautiful arena. We are season ticket holders for the Hawks and the Skyhawks. And we are really thrilled that you're here, and we hope you come back to see us. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Going on with our other sponsors, I'd like to introduce you Visit Houston. You've seen their name flashed up on the marquee. And I would like to introduce Amra Elmore. She is a National Account Executive at Visit Houston. Thank you.
And you said my name properly, correctly. Wow. I answer to anything. I have a weird name, so I'm Amra, Amber, Anna, Irma, Uma, whatever. I'm fine. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I have been with Visit Houston for just 2 years, actually a little bit less than 2 years, but I live in Maryland, so this was a quick trip for me. I'm glad to be here with my PCMA Southeast peers. I have it. Do I just click them? Okay, so I have a little video that I will show you, but before I do that, I thought instead of me telling you about Visit Houston and the city and what we have, I thought we would play a little trivia game, and I have questions. They're multiple choice, and if you raise your hand, if you know the answer or you think you know the answer and you guess it, I have these t-shirts. So you get a t-shirt, and I have 5 questions, 5 t-shirts, so let's get started. By the way, is there anybody here who has never been to Houston? Okay, that's not bad. Airport does not count. All right, first question. So this artist, can you guess which of these 3 is the most nominated female artist in Grammy history? Who raised their hand first? I didn't see. Was it you? Good job. Yes, it is. You know who else is also from Houston? There is a lot of celebrities, but Lizzo. I love Lizzo. And also Yolanda Adams. She just sang America the Beautiful last Sunday during the Super Bowl. All right, the next question, I don't know if you knew, but Houston is the most ethnically and racially diverse city in the country. And can you guess how many languages are spoken in Houston? How many? Correct. Oh my gosh, I'm impressed. Okay, I thought this one was going to be hard. But yes, in fact, 1/3 of Houstonians age 5 and older speak a language other than English at home. And this accent is not from Houston or Texas. I'm actually from Bosnia, just in case you're wondering. You knew you were right, that it was in Houston. And also, Houston is the 4th largest city in terms of population. And we'll see what happens this year with this census, but it may take Chicago's number 3 spot. All right, next question. Do you know the answer to this? Yes? Oh, the lady behind you, sorry. Yes. But the correct answer is? Yes. Well played. Yes. Well, Houston. That's actually very good because most people think that Houston is only energy capital of the world, which it has been. And oil and gas industry is definitely one of the major industries there. But also since the 80s, the economy has completely diversified, and now it's huge. And it includes healthcare and manufacturing and finance, technology, and of course space with massive space center. And I don't know if any of you remember, but last year we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. And of course, Houston was where the mission was based, space mission. All right, third question. Do you know the answers to this one? What is the largest medical campus in the world located in Houston? Yes. Yes, it is. That's right. It is definitely the largest medical center in the world, and it has 54 medical and research institutions, and we're just incredibly lucky to have those tremendous resources in our backyard that we can leverage for conventions. All right. Anybody here attended PCMA Convening Leaders in San Francisco? All right, that's pretty good. Not sure if you knew, but we are hosting it next year. So do you know how many hotels and how many hotel rooms are? Yes. What's that? Correct. Oh my gosh, you guys are actually pretty good. I thought this was going to be hard, but I'm very impressed with all of your knowledge of Houston. That is correct. We have, since 2016, the city has invested $175 million in improving the downtown district. And of course, that was leading to the Super Bowl 51 that Houston hosted in 2017. So if you plan to come next year, you will be very happy how compact our convention campus is with all of the hotels around the convention center, many restaurants, entertainment venues. You'd be happy to know that we have 2 airports, so a lot of options for direct flights and different price points. And just, it's going to be fun. It's Texas, it's live music. It will be wonderful. So thank you for your time. I appreciate your attention, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you in Houston next year. Thank you.
Houston is inspired.
Almost everything about my life as it is right now is directly tied back to my time in Houston.
Doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, you're going to find a corner of this city to say, that's my town.
It's a wonderful town.
I feel eternally connected to Houston, Texas.
We're 1,000 miles from comfort. We have traveled land and sea. But as long as you are with me, there's no place I'd rather be. With every step we take, Kyoto to the bay, strolling so casually. We're different and same, give you another name, switch up the batteries. If you gave me a chance, I would take it. It's a shot in the dark, but I'll make it. Know with all of your heart, you can't shake me. When I am with you, there's no place I'd rather be. No place I'd rather be. No place I'd rather be. place I'd rather be.
Thank you, Houston. That was a great video, by the way. All right, so we're actually here to learn something. We are here. It's time for our program, and I am thrilled to introduce Alan Kleinfeld. Alan is an experienced speaker, writer, and educator with over 25 years in meeting management and over 15 years in public safety. Today, he is going to help us start the process of writing our own emergency response plans for our organizations. So take it away, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, everyone. Thanks to the sponsors and the attendees. I have to get my technology ready, so give me 1 second, and we should be good to go. Okay, thanks for your patience. All right, so you guys picked an interesting day because I'm talking about emergency response plans, and that's one of the harder things, in my opinion, to do with security and safety for event management. And before we get into it, I have a challenge for you. And this isn't because I want you to pay attention to me, which I do, but I have a point to show you with this. So do me a favor and put your cell phone away someplace where you can't see it. On the floor, someplace where you can't feel it or touch it or see it. This won't be for long. It's okay. So I'm the same way. You'll get to it in a minute, okay? All right, so I mentioned that the topic of emergency response planning is a little tougher. This is probably what a lot of us think about when we think about event safety, and I kind of wish Mercedes had stayed behind because I'm going to need a cheering section when we get into the guts of all this because it can get really technical, all right? So about me, what I wanted to say was one of the things about emergency response planning is that event safety is one of those things that we kind of have to deal with now, and it's not something we necessarily want to. We want to have the kind of things where our events go pretty flawlessly, and our attendees have a good time, and they have something to take away, and where we as meeting professionals don't have to look like this all the time. All right, so a little bit about me real quick, of how I got where I am and why I like to talk to this industry, this group of people. These are some of my clients I've had in the past. So I actually come from the meeting planning background. I've been an in-house planner, I've been a contract planner, I've been a third-party planner, I've done all that. So I come from the same area as a lot of the meeting professionals come from. And the reason why I tell you that is because it's also important for you to understand that I know how stressful it is. This is me pretty much today. I shaved the beard. I might have gained a few pounds or more, but this is me today, and this is what I looked like last week when I had my annual conference. All right? So you understand where I'm coming from, correct? Okay, good. And then the law enforcement part of my background actually started in 2001, right after 9/11 happened. I was living in DC, and we could see the Pentagon burning. And in November of 2001, I signed up as a reserve police officer outside of Washington, D.C. And in some regard, I've been in law enforcement ever since. I've been a volunteer, I've been a paid officer, I've done animal control, I've done dispatch, I've done a lot of different things. And this is my current photo for what I look like in my uniform now. And of course, like most cops, I think I look like this. Right? So, and that's just to make it a little fun. Here's what we're going to talk about today, real quickly. So the meat of it is going to be emergency response. And if we have time and we're not running too late and you want me to, I'll cover active shooter really quickly. It won't be too long, but I'll go over those things. First question is, do we know the difference between safety and security and emergency planning? All right? So safety is a feeling free from harm. So let's take, for example, when we walked in here today to the arena, you had to go through security, didn't you? You feel pretty safe right now? Yeah. There are marked exits where you can see them. Yep. There are actually video cameras all over the place, even though you may not be able to see them. Some of them you can see, right? And then what is security? That's the measures we take to prevent harm. So that's safety and security. And then emergency planning is this. The purpose of emergency planning is to prepare a response to an emergency. And the emergency definition might vary depending on your needs or your event or your client or whatnot. In general, an emergency is kind of an unexpected event or situation which can cause harm. And you need to either prevent it, mitigate it, or respond to it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, okay? One of the things that makes it difficult for meeting planners is we get really into our habits. And we're now starting, so for any planners or planners here, who already has some kind of emergency plan in place? Suppliers and planners? Yeah? All right, great. It's one of the things I like to say is we need to start making it a habit. And some planners I run into think that it's a hard habit to get into because it's so complex. It's such a big topic. And I'm going to try to convey to you today that it's not. That by doing a couple of easy things right off the bat, it'll become a habit. And as that habit grows, you'll start adding other things to your list of safety and security. So I'll get a little better for you, okay? Real quickly, we're going to go over fear and brain science. Why do I bring this up? Anyone have an idea? All right, so I have a question. Who's right now afraid of the coronavirus? Who's afraid of the flu? That's probably a little more accurate. In the United States, we have about 9 confirmed cases of the coronavirus, no deaths. And the last year's flu season, October 2018 to May 2019, we had over 36,000 deaths in the U.S. from the flu, according to the CDC. So the reason I put this up here is because sometimes we really don't know if what we're seeing is an actual fear or if it's something that is made for us to fear, something by the media, and our brains actually can't tell the difference. So I've been doing some research on this because there's so much anxiety around these days. Anxiety in our meetings, anxiety in our office, there's just a lot of anxiety for whatever reason. And I experience this a lot where I'll hear a loud sound and all of a sudden my anxiety level goes off because I don't know what it is. Is it a bomb? Is it a gun? Is it a plane flying into a building? So these anxiety issues are something that I experience as well. And what's funny is we don't know if the threat is not real, our bodies can still react to it. There's a physiological and a medical and anatomical reaction, and if we do that too often, we can actually make ourselves sick. So one of the things I tell people is you don't have to prepare for every emergency in the world. 1, it's impossible. 2, there are probabilities that something may or may not happen to you. And 3, if it's not a real threat or a real chance of happening, don't freak out about it, because now you're just getting scared for nothing. Does that make sense? All right. So there's just a couple of cute things I put up here. Is the threat real? So you guys might know that as we evolved, that's the fight or flight response you've probably heard of. You've also probably heard of a book or a saying that zebras don't get ulcers. And the reason zebras don't get ulcers is because when they have a genuine threat, their bodies respond automatically, and as soon as the threat is gone, as soon as that line disappears, the zebra goes right back down to calm. And humans are supposed to do that as well, but it's a little harder for us. All right, so this is one of the things I've realized, and it's true. If you read this thing, people who are afraid of Jaws have a reaction to going into water in a pool or a lake, even though they know there's not a chance they'll get bitten by a shark. Can anyone relate to this? Right? It's something common. So there is that. I have a question. What do you think, how many people here think terrorism is one of the leading causes of death for U.S. travelers abroad? Terrorism. It's not, actually. If you watch the news, you might think that. But actually, it's traffic accidents. That's how most of us get killed when we're traveling abroad. Right. So the reason I bring that up is because we need to know what we're afraid of and if it's a real fear or not. So these are the 3 things that are kind of ingrained in us. These are the fight or flight responses we're used to. If something is endangering your loved ones, you will go into a fight or flight mode if there is a actual danger. If you yourself, the middle picture there, if you yourself are being threatened and there's an actual fear, you will go into that fight or flight mode. And what I find interesting for our industry is that you can also have this reaction if there's a lack of control. And I know a lot of meeting planners like to have that control, right? That's why I'm only like 23 years old. This is all premature white hair from stress. All right? So here's how you deal with fear. You ID it. This is talking to yourself. Do I need to be afraid of the coronavirus? All right, maybe it's a real fear, maybe it's not. Let me understand it. All right, well, now I understand that in the U.S., for my domestic meeting only, where I have no international travelers, there's only 9 people affected in the entire country, I don't really think this is going to be a real fear for me. Reduce the distractions so you're not always around. And I have a question about that. Who has already looked at their cell phone since they put it down? Be honest. You have a question? My question was, who has looked at their cell phone since I asked them to put it down? The internet was created to distract us. And so we are distracted a lot, and one of the things we get distracted from is the safety of ourselves, our meetings, our events. So I just wanted to bring up, when it comes to real fear, when you're planning for emergency response, don't be distracted. And then take action. So for example, with the coronavirus, if you do have international travelers and you do think it is a real fear, you're going to take steps to help prevent it. And that might be hand sanitizer, that might be face masks, that might be working with airlines to see if your attendees are going to be able to get into the United States, things like that. Does that make sense? Understand that? Okay, great. So real quickly, what is our obligation to have an emergency response? And I asked an attorney this question, and I said, do we as meeting planners have a responsibility? Do we have an obligation? And she said, yeah. I said, okay, great. What is it? Guess what she said? Do what is reasonable. Do what is reasonable. So I bring this up, these are questions that you might end up asking yourselves when you're planning your meetings. What is my obligation? Do I need to have an AED, which is the automated defibrillator? Do I need to have Band-Aids and aspirin, things of that nature? These are questions you would ask yourself if it's an obligation you want to have. It might be part of your emergency response. I'm not telling you have to do any of this. I'm telling you you need to ask yourself if you need to do this. All right? Real quickly, types and varieties of safety and security. You have your crisis communication. Part of this, these are all kind of broken down. So you've got your crisis communication. That actually is part of emergency response plan. We won't go into the details of it today, but in any kind of emergency response, you're going to have some plan to communicate with your attendees, your members, your stakeholders, the public, government officials, depending on the event and where it is and how big it is and who all it affects. You got cybersecurity. This is a huge one. I don't talk much about this either in emergency response planning. And I like to tell meeting planners and people in the industry, you don't have to be an IT person. It's not your responsibility to protect your data from attacks or spam. It's your responsibility to make sure that someone in your office is doing it. This could be considered an emergency. You get on site for an annual conference, you got 1,500 attendees, turns out your database, which you've brought on a laptop, has been hacked, and now all your information is out there in the world. You're gonna need to have some kind of response for that. You, the meeting planner, the meeting professional, may not have to know how to do it, but they need to know who to go to get it fixed. Reputational and public relations. A lot of people think, we're small, we don't need to worry about anything. If someone ends up dying at your event or you're at a large downtown hotel and something bad happens, you may have to deal with some kind of rejection from the public. So you're going to want to be prepared for that as well. Emergency planning, we'll talk about today. Environmental safety and security. I'd like to think of that as your what's going on at your office, what's going on with protests and politics, what's going on in the physical space around your hotel, what kind of environment are you walking into? You'll need to take that into consideration. Finally, physical space. Physical space is a good one for emergency response because there's usually some element of control there. In this physical space right here, you can see where the exits are. You know where the doors are. You know where the restrooms are. You know, when you walked in, did you notice there was security staff? Yeah. Did you notice if one of them had a radio on their hip? They did. So now you got communication as well. All right? So when it comes to emergency planning, the big things are this: prevention and mitigation. Actually, let me back this up so you can see the funny little mouse. If you're doing your prevention mitigation, if an emergency should happen, that's already one piece of the puzzle done. And that takes a lot of the other stresses off of you. All right? And then distraction. This is a big one today. Because you know how you're sitting there in a meeting or whatever, and you can feel that phone vibrate. And even though you have the urge not to look at it, it's become a habit. And you could be right there in the middle when someone's saying, hey, we just had a fire that started in the balcony, and you're looking at your phone. All right? So try not to get distracted. I know it's hard. The other thing I want to mention when it comes to emergency planning is not to cheap out. Anyone recognize the picture in the middle? So these here are a couple of oil refineries owned by BP, all right? And this is the stadium in Atlanta. And I'm not saying Atlanta cheaped out when Hurricane Katrina happened.
That's New Orleans.
I mean, New Orleans. Forgive me. Forgive me. Forgive me. My mistake. New Orleans. I keep thinking it's Charleston as well. New Orleans. Sorry about that. Forgive me. So you all remember Hurricane Katrina? All right. Do you remember who was blamed for it? Was anyone blamed for it? Was the mayor? Who? Anyone else? Corps of Engineers? The levees, Corps of Engineers? Well, it turned out that it was a huge cluster between the state, the city, and the feds. And what happened was, I was taking some coursework at GW University in DC, and one of the research projects we had to do was look at Katrina in New Orleans. And it turns out that about 9 months before Katrina happened, the federal government, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management, had a training session, and they were calling it Hurricane Pam. And by coincidence, Hurricane Pam mimicked Katrina. They just didn't know it. And about halfway through the training for Pam, FEMA came and said, we're out of money. We don't want to spend any more money on this training. Everyone go home. We're done. And then Katrina hit, and no one was ready for it. So that's what I mean by don't cheap out. It probably would have cost them an extra $10,000 or $15,000 to finish that training, and now it's cost billions or hundreds of millions. Same thing with these here. In one of the BP cases, a lower level manager had gone to an upper level manager and said, we need to spend $150,000 to fix these gizmos. And the upper management said, no. Well, now the gizmo was a safety element, and the gizmo failed. And now they're into lawsuits, death, and hundreds of millions of dollars of expenses. And $150,000 for BP is probably worth about a nickel to us regular folks. So take it into consideration when you're doing your emergency planning. All right, emergency planning. We're going to get into this stuff. It's going to get a little technical, so if I go too fast or you don't understand, please let me know, okay? You got just so you know, this circle here of these 5 topics, public information. I got this from the federal government. So the stuff I'm telling you is not necessarily mine. I'm not trying to sell it to you. It is out there for you. This is one of the versions I've been familiar with in my law enforcement career, because we use something similar when we plan for hurricanes in Charleston, okay? And what you're going to be preparing for are all kinds of different things. This is the Pentagon on 9/11. That's where it was after 9/11 that I signed up to start doing this. This is Charleston right here. I forget which hurricane that was, Matthew, or I can't remember. It was a bad one. California fires. This is protesters in DC, and I mention that because when it comes to environmental safety, if you're going to be planning a meeting someplace in a place where they have a Capitol building or government-based stuff, you might want to prepare for this if you're going to be taking your meeting there during some kind of political upheaval. And then the coronavirus, which you've already mentioned just briefly. All right. The one thing I get asked a lot is, can't you just help me write one emergency plan as a template? And the answer is no. I kind of wish it was. From a meeting plan perspective, it would be really nice, wouldn't it? Or even from a supplier perspective. It'd be nice to have one plan and be done. But because most meetings change in size, or change in location, or change in dates, you have to kind of review it each time you plan a meeting. If you were holding the same meeting in the same destination, in the same venue, at the same time of year, over and over again, you might be able to get away with one plan that you just have to tweak now and again. But you do need to, if you want to be prepared, you're going to need to do this for each event you hold. All right. And it needs to be a written plan. And here's why. You got your accountability, you got your coordination, your responsibility. One thing I like the best is the historical record. Because once you start it, you don't have to create the wheel over and over again. The format you can use each time, and some of it's going to be the same over and over again. It just may vary. The things that may vary might be the size of the group, the venue, or the dates. But a lot of the procedures are going to remain the same. Okay? So that's why you want to have a written plan. Now, for us seasoned meeting professionals, when we started out, we would have the big 3-ring binders, and that'd be our conference manual, our Bible, right? Well, now they have these apps. You know what an app is. They have these apps, and one of the apps, or a couple of these apps, are actually specifically for emergency response plans. Just full disclosure, I don't work for these guys. I'm not promoting them. I don't get anything back from them. I just know it would be helpful if I were a meeting planner that I had these. So one of them is called Playbook. And you can actually go in and create you go in the back end on the internet and you create your emergency response plan, and then it goes on this app. And the nice thing about the app is it's got all contact information, it's got hotel information, it's got what to do if someone needs CPR, it's got all these things set aside for you, and all you have to do is click on the appropriate one and it takes you to the page where it has the procedure. The other one is this one called Event Aware, similar type of thing. So I just put it out there so if you want to try to make it a little easier for yourselves, because it may seem like a daunting task, look these things up. All right? Now, before we get into the actual steps, this is an example. So I work for a police department called Folly Beach right outside of Charleston. Anyone know Folly Beach? And Folly Beach is a small little beach town, and they do a lot of street festivals in the off season. And this is one of them. This is called Folly Gras, it's in February, and it's our version of Mardi Gras parade. All right? And this is an example of our actual written response plan. And the reason I show you this is to give you an idea of how complex or detailed it could be for an actual event. All right? So this thing here has got name, time, and all this. Got control of the main secure area. It's got all these details. All right. It's got the weather forecast. It's got all this, and that's just one of the first pages. So you know now what you're getting into as far as the weather that day and things that are expected. They've done some research into this. Okay. Then here's an actual map of what's going to be going on. And it shows you where the trash cans are. It shows you where the ATMs are. It shows you pretty much everything. And you can see that it's got a little legend at the bottom to correspond to the things in the map. And that's just for us, the police department, to know where certain restaurants are, certain bandstands are. So if we get a call and someone says, I need help at Woody's, I don't know if this thing actually works, we know where Woody's is. It's 4 on the map. So this is coming from the police kind of point of view, but you can see how it can apply to a meeting planner. Because if you're the meeting planner, most people are going to be calling for you if something goes wrong, correct? Okay. Support incident briefing. Here it's got a timeline and what's going to happen at that timeline. All right? And then it's got assignments. Actual names, resource identifier for us is our call sign. Date, time, what you're going to be doing at those units. So if you were going to do this for your staff, it may have name, role, where they're going to be positioned, and maybe a cell phone number. Unless you're using radios, then it may have, you can just use your name or some other identifier. All right. All right, so now back to our circle. So here are the 5 items. And the one we're going to spend the most time on today is the assessment part. And the reason why is because that's usually the one that takes the most time. Because once you know what you need to prepare for, the steps to do that might just kind of flow naturally. I mean, you know, for example, that if the power goes out, you're going to need to be talking with your venue about getting the generator turned on. Or if that's not an option, evacuating people someplace where they can seek shelter or get warmth or find more electricity. And then you've got these other steps here. Just FYI, these slides will be available if you want them afterwards. So, all right, so that's the first thing we're going to deal with is the assessment. And that's the one that is usually the longest because it takes the most time. So I'm going to show you some actual training materials from a course that I took as a police officer on event safety and security. And this is one of them. The categories of threats and hazards that you might experience. You got your natural, technological, and human caused. Which do you think is the hardest one to plan for? Human caused. What's one of the human caused things we see a lot in the news these days? Mass shootings. I get a lot of asks about how do we protect against an active shooter. It's really hard to do, okay? But the other things, some of the other things you can plan for a little bit. I say that coming from Charleston, where we always end up having to plan for a hurricane. Every year for the last 4, we've had to activate our emergency operations center, even though the hurricane never actually hit Charleston. But we know it's coming. We actually get a lot of grief for it. The governor will usually declare a state of emergency and do a mandatory evacuation 5-6 days before the hurricane hits, and then it never hits, and everyone gets so mad that he made everyone evacuate. And the reverse is don't cheap out. If people had stayed and he had not done it, how many deaths would we have had, and how many destroyed lives would we have? All right. The other thing are sources to identify the threats and hazards. So so you got this list, right? Now how are you going to find out if they're really happening? And these are some of the things you might be able to do. Some of them might be from past experience, like our hurricane scenario, for example. We can check the weather. We're in tune with the National Weather Service, and we know it's happened before. So there are these things you can do to try to identify what may or may not happen. All right. Then you've got 2 phases to do an assessment. 2 phases, and it's called the THERA method. It's Threat, Hazard, Identification, and Risk Assessment. It's a mouthful. It's from the federal government. But this is actually from the class itself. You want to Google THERA, you can Google THERA and you'll get some of this exact same information. All right. And that's the way that a lot of places will do their emergency response assessment. Remember, we're still just assessing. Your qualitative is time, duration, location, attendance. This is usually kind of the easier stuff, because with a meeting, you know the time it's going to take place, you know how long it's going to take, you know the location, you know roughly how many attendees you're going to have, you know all this stuff. So a lot of this stuff here is not too hard to get to. What's nice about the qualitative stuff is that it kind of helps you summarize things. It's just basically compiling some numbers and some information which you already have at your disposal, right? Okay. The quantitative part, it's a supplement to the qualitative. It helps what you do with this part of the quantitative. It's going to help you take the other information, the quantitative, and it's going to help you score it. And the higher the score, the more likely the risk. The higher the score, the more likely the risk. And I'm going to show you this risk scale. It's one of these slides here. All right. So the quantitative gives threats context, all right? And it's going to assign values, which is how you get the rating system. And this is it right here. So risk is the calculation of threat or hazard times vulnerability times consequences. All right? So in their little example right here on the screen, they're talking about a political protest. The threat to the asset, whatever the asset might be in that case, maybe the Capitol building. Its protesters are highly likely. What's the vulnerability? They don't have enough security measures. So what's going to happen if they don't get security measures? They're going to end up having property damage and assaults. So there's the risk assessment. Now you're going to have to figure out what to do for that. All right, so I told you it comes with a rating system, and here's the rating system. And I'll show you an example of this because it's a little confusing now, right? You got this threat, you got this formula for coming up with the rating system. These are your rating levels. So if you do the calculation and it comes up as severe, that means your rating was 36 to 64. All right. And then these numbers here, so these numbers here actually come from adding up and multiplying these numbers here, which correspond to the threats, vulnerabilities, and consequences. Does everyone see that? Right? I didn't go too fast on that. Okay. So what we're going to do is, these are your threats and the corresponding number and your vulnerabilities. So the bigger the threat, the bigger the vulnerability, the bigger the impact, the higher the number. When you do your formula, you're going to come up with that. You're going to come up with this level, and that'll tell you if it's a severe risk. That means you need to do some serious planning to prepare for it. If it's a low risk, you don't have to do a lot of planning to prepare for it. That makes sense? Okay, thank you. All right, so here's just a couple of examples. And I'll just let you look at them for a minute. But what it does is, and it shows you how to create the risk. So it takes each of those elements from the thera, the threat, the vulnerability, and the impact or the consequence. It gives it a number based on these definitions, all right? And then you come up with your risk level. So from looking at this, what item has the highest chance of happening? Terrorism. It's got a 36. So that's where you're going to put most of your resources and planning. I had mentioned earlier that you can't prepare for everything. You want to prepare for what's most probable. So that's where this helps. You're going to come up with other things. Hey, we're going to Miami in September. What might be a risk? A hurricane. And what's the likelihood of that hurricane happening in September? Well, once you punch all the numbers and crunch it all, it could be really high. So you're going to want to make that your top priority. Whereas the other thing that might not happen in Miami in September is a snowstorm. It's probably unlikely, so you're not going to put a lot of resources into planning for that emergency. That is a dramatic example, but you understand what I'm saying? Okay. All right, so you understand all that. All right. So they're going with terrorism for the next example. Talks about an extremist group, and it talks about your core capabilities. Now, we haven't talked about capabilities yet. So it talked about vulnerabilities, and it talked about consequences. Capabilities are things you already have that might help make you less vulnerable and have fewer consequences. So for example, I'll give you an example in a few minutes, excuse me. All right, so here's my example. This is a scenario. The scenario is an annual conference of 300 people, Thursday through Sunday pattern, Federation of Minority Professionals. It's going to be held in March of 2020 in Richmond. This is just an example, all right? Just knowing that information, is there anything that you might think could be a risk? What's that?
You're in the Washington, D.C. area.
Uh-huh.
And then the Federation of Minority Professionals, so you probably have some very high-profile people.
That's true. That's a great point. There's another point about that. So a couple of years ago, something happened in Southern Virginia. Gun rights, white supremacists, pretty close to Richmond. And you've got the Federation of Minority Professionals. So that might be something to consider as well. And you do have the thing at the DC. So let's say something happens in DC, or someone from DC comes down, a high-ranking professional. There's going to be some advanced work to do on that. But here's the assessment we're looking at right now. of this on this right here. Now what if we change it to March in Boston? This is going to be our example that I'll show you. So your March in Boston, what is the most likely risk? Snow. Snow, all right? So you got your weather and your snowstorm. So what's the vulnerability? Well, I did a little research, and in March in Boston, the average snowfall is 8 inches over 4 days. All right, so now Atlanteans, is 4 inches a lot?
Yes.
Or is 8 inches a lot? Yeah, it is for Atlanta, right? It is for Charleston. It would be for a lot of places. Is it a lot for Boston? No. Right? So now if you're putting your meeting planner hat on and you have to go to, you're holding your meeting you're an Atlanta-based meeting planner and you're doing your meeting in Boston in March, and this is something you don't have much experience with, you're gonna have to go with you're gonna find some capabilities. You don't have them in Atlanta. Do they have them in Boston? Yes. All right? So some of the impact might be traffic delays, transportation delays. There probably won't be a loss of power because they're used to it. And they're so used to it, they probably won't even close schools or governments. That's changing now as things get a little more politicized. It used to be when I moved to Charleston from DC, and when I first moved to DC, nothing seemed to close anything. And I remember after President Obama was first in office, we had a light dusting of snow and the federal government decided to close, and he kind of looked around and said, you guys would never last in Chicago. But it's changing. But right now in Boston, they still have pretty good capabilities there. The capabilities are excellent. I remember I said, I lived in Boston. This is not my picture, but I was there that day on April 1st, 1997. They had about 28 inches of snow overnight. And the reason I throw this picture out there is because I tell you to go for the low-hanging fruit, plan what is most probable. Chances are this won't happen to you in Boston in March, but you should know it's happened before. And if you know it happens before and you can go to your venue and say, hey, what happened? What about that storm that you had in 2015? How did you guys handle it? And see what their capabilities are. Make sense? Okay. So this is kind of an assessment based on our snowstorm scenario. So I mentioned earlier one of the best things to do is mitigate it or prevent it. Well, you can't prevent a snowstorm, but what can you do? Maybe you can rebook it. Maybe your attendees are coming from a lot of the southern region and flights might get canceled or whatnot because of this storm. So you're gonna be working with your partners and you're gonna check what capabilities you have. So one of the things you can do is maybe rebook it. Call the venue, hey, can we avoid a penalty if we rebook within 3 months? Move the meeting. Move it to a different city, different venue, maybe just someplace that doesn't get as much snow. Boston's very close to, say, New England's small, and whatever hits Boston probably hits most of the New England, but Providence, Rhode Island might get less snow than Boston. Maybe the storm's not gonna hit there as bad. Maybe your venue, you call the venue and they say, let me check with my sister property in Providence, and we move the meeting. All right? So one of the things about weather with most emergencies, it's always hard to predict. Like the last 3 years in Charleston, we've been predicted to get hit dead center by hurricanes. Knock on wood, it hasn't happened yet. But we prepare for it each time. Forecast is no guarantee. So you just want to know that even though it's low-hanging fruit and it might not happen, you need to stay in tune with intelligence. This is an important distinction. Information is just that, information. Intelligence are facts, and they're different. To get intelligence in this situation, you're probably going to want to call your venue and or the National Weather Service. Hey, my name is Alan. I'm a meeting planner from Atlanta. I've got 300 people coming to Boston. Can you tell me what I see on Weather Channel that the world's coming to an end in Boston? What's really going on? And find out. Another example, I had a client that was holding a meeting. This was past fall. They called me and they said, we have a meeting coming up in Hong Kong and these protests have just broken out. Are we going to be able to hold the meeting? And I advised them and I just said, you can't pay attention to the information you see on TV or social media. You need to get intelligence. You need to call the State Department, maybe in Hong Kong. Talk to your venue, find out what's going on. It turned out they kept the meeting going. They had no problems. The protests were happening, but it did not affect the airlines. It did not affect the cabs. It did not affect the hotels as had been portrayed to us. So get intelligence, not information. All right, so if you're going to be going through with this meeting in Boston, you're going to plan information for attendees, and you're going to communicate with suppliers and stakeholders. You're going to keep checking news and media, getting your intelligence. You're going to keep getting information from the airport. And you're going to go through with this meeting like you would normally. Key point here is communication with your attendees. Okay? If the storm actually happens and you actually have to initiate your plan, what might that look like? Again, it's going to be a lot of communication. One of the things that so we all have our cell phones. You can't put them down for 15 minutes. How many of you have your apps notifications turned on for certain apps? You know what I'm talking about? Little thing that beeps and says it's time to take another sip of water, or beep, your flight's delayed. This is one of the things that you can do if you have a meeting. If you have an app made for your meeting, use that. Or if your event has a Twitter feed or whatever, you're trying to get stuff out and keep communication going. Because one of the things that drives attendees crazy, as you know, is not getting information. Think about when you get stuck on an airplane and they don't ever tell you what's going on. You hate it, right? It's really frustrating. And that's what your planners are thinking now. Should I leave? Should I get on my plane and go to Boston? What happens when I get to Boston? Is the meeting going to still go on? You need to get that kind of stuff out, all right? And then there's the recovery. These things here at the top are part of that circle. Those are the circle steps. And so that's how they all come back to work. It's really important after every time you initiate an emergency plan, even if you don't have to do the whole thing, to regroup and say, hey, what worked, what didn't work, what kind of feedback did we get? Did our communications work? Did our attendees get what they needed? Get that kind of feedback and alter as you need to. All right, I'm almost done. All right, that's an example of the capabilities. So I talked about, we had all those other circle items, and then we talked about capabilities. The thing with the snowstorm, I gave it a low risk. Even though it might actually happen, you've got great core capabilities. Does that make sense? So you go from here to an example of capabilities. The reason why it's not a high threat is because you're going to a city that has great capabilities. So even though you're a planner from Atlanta and you may not know much about snow removal and salt and all that stuff, your venue does. You've got good capabilities and they're used to it, and the infrastructure is built to keep running in that kind of situation. So does that make sense? So even though it might seem like a big deal to you coming from Atlanta and 8 inches of snow is crazy, the people in Boston are going to laugh at you if you say that you can't go outside in the snow, which is okay. People laugh at me all the time. All right. So I'm calling it a low assessment with those things there. Let me catch up my slides real quick here. Okay. And the capabilities are excellent. So my assessment now, after I crunch all the numbers and all that stuff, I'm giving this a low risk, which means there's not a lot to do to respond to it if you have to go to emergency, but if it happens, you know what to do. It's going to be communication with your attendees and your venue, and you're going to confirm that the venue is putting their capabilities to work. All right, that was a real quick, easy example. Any questions? Everyone, that made sense? Okay, great. In our original scenario, we talked about it a little bit, the original scenario in Richmond, and the weather in Virginia, in Richmond in March, probably is not much of a concern. Politics, we talked about that. That might be a concern in Richmond in March. Another thing, sporting events. I've got a group that I just was working with. I put together a safety summary that they send out before the meeting to let people know a little bit about the safety there. They're going to Baltimore in March, and the Orioles their hotel is right next to the Orioles Stadium, and the Orioles are having 3 night games in a row the same night the conference is taking place. And I thought to myself, man, that traffic is going to be horrible on those nights. So one of the things we put in the safety announcement was, hey, attendees, just be advised on these dates, you might see extra vehicle traffic, extra pedestrians, larger crowds, and this is why. Don't be freaked out. So, any other thoughts on either scenario? Any questions? All right. And we talked about this real briefly, assessment. So in the short time we had, we went through all of those that entire circle. All right? So I talked about where are we now, what's happening now. A couple of things we need to get ready for, and that is things like coronavirus. We talked about it real briefly. The reason reason people are kind of worried about it is because no one knows how to cure it, what to do about it. But right now, it still is not as bad as the flu in the United States. All right? A couple of things that might be coming up. I think you remember the Vegas shooting. One of the things that is brought up is, will it affect our outdoor events? Are the outdoor events now vulnerable? Do you need to have everything tented? Do you have to take things inside? And then that leads to another thing that might be coming up, the use of drones, both for the good guys and the bad guys. So there are things on the horizon that will, someone in my position never has to worry about, right, work security. So, and these are some of the resources. Like I said earlier, if you want to take a picture of the screen, you can. I'll be happy to send these out to anyone. But these are where I get a lot of my information. That's one slide. I have another slide of these. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide. And there's some more. All right. All right, real quickly, do you want me to stop or should I do active shooter real quick? Active shooter? You guys ready to go? Okay, real quickly. So active shooter, there's two main things to the active shooter. There's the run, hide, and fight. Who has not heard of that? Right. The other one here is called alert, lockdown, inform, counter, evacuate. That's mostly for the law enforcement industry. So you don't have to really worry about that one, but I threw it out there in case you heard about it. Active shooter Jason Bourne style, you'll talk to some people in the military or in law enforcement, and instead of run, hide, fight, you might hear move, escape, attack, avoid, deny, defend. The difference mostly is language, but in the Jason Bourne version, and this is true, I kid you not, I've had experts who will tell me that if they're trapped in a room, they'll find a way to break a chair into 4 pieces and use the chair to climb up into the drywall of the room, and they'll get out over the ceiling. And I'm like, I look at myself and say, man, I'm a 50-year-old fat white guy. I ain't ever doing that. So that's that. I always go back to the run, hide, and fight, because that's the standard that the FBI uses. So run, hide, and fight. And there is a great logo, a great picture coming up that I'll show you. When it comes to active shooter, I mentioned earlier that it's almost impossible to tell if someone's going to be an active shooter. But should something happen, and this is just a quick example, you're a week out of your annual conference and the CFO gets fired because he has rage issues. Might he become a threat? Just a scenario. It doesn't mean if someone gets fired, they're going to be a threat. This is just a scenario. I say that over and over again because I've had people come up to me and say, we just fired someone in my office. Does that mean but what you can do in that scenario is if you know that who the person is, it's the CFO, and the staff knows who the person is, you can actually share his photo and information with the hotel staff and local police and try to keep that person out. Right? If they get in, you can protect yourself by making sure they can't open doors. You can use your belt or purse strap to keep doors shut, like this picture shows. You can turn over chairs and tables using little phalanx. It actually helps. It also confuses them. All right. Silence your cell phone, things like that. If you know that this CFO guy is actually having an anger issue and he's made a threat against you, you can do things. Postpone the meeting, move the meeting to a different place. You need to train staff. And last thing, you need to tell the police. All right? Here's something, after 9/11 happened, we got a little complacent. And then after the Boston bombings happened, we started to react again. One of the things I remember from right after 9/11 was see something, say something. Do you all remember that? See something, say, it really does matter. And some people will say, I don't want to bother the police with something so stupid. Well, it's not. Because what happens if it turns out to be something, and then you let it go? So if there were a legit threat, like my example of the fired CFO, it would be worth going to the local authority where your meeting's being held and say, here's a picture of our CFO. He told us he was going to come and get us. We think he might be. Does that make sense? All right, and this is what I mentioned about the run, hide, and fight. And this is, again, in the slides. But it talks about run, hide, fight, and what you should do once you get out, what you should do with your cell phone. And this is still what the FBI is using, so this is what I tend to train people on. All right? Whoops. And that's pretty much about it. Any questions? All right. You're back to normal. Back to normal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Al. Yeah, actually, this is the end, and thank you very much for being here. This is great information. Hopefully, we won't have to use it, but if we do, then obviously we have been informed. I think last thing I just want to say is we're getting ready to have a reception up in the lobby area, so please stay around for that. We're having open face wafacho bites, bacon burnt in mac and cheese cups, and all sorts of fun stuff up there. But I do want to remind you all that on our website, PCMA Southeast, you can see that from our community service, for this particular meeting, we are supporting the relief efforts for Australia. And so if you'll go to our website, the PCMA Southeast, you'll see ways that you can donate to Vets Beyond Borders, Australian Red Cross, and County Fire Authority. If you have any questions about those things, you can see Brad Smith, who is our chair for community services. And that's it. Hopefully you all enjoyed this. Thank you for coming, and please stay around for the reception up at the top. Thank you.